I'd say she's a little worn.
Welcome back to the OSM channel. In today's video, I'd like to teach you how to replace the drag link on a Craftsman lawn tractor. Specifically, my model is a Craftsman LT-2000. If you have the 1000, I also think there's a 3000 model. If you have either iteration of this tractor, I believe the process is going to be very similar, if not identical. Now, I've already scoped out this job, and the engineers actually thought ahead. They actually made our lives easier for once, which is kind of nice. So I purchased an aftermarket drag link from Amazon, $22. I'll leave a link for the part in the description down below. So without further ado, I'll move the camera over to the lawn tractor and we'll get started. All right, so my first recommendation would be to jack up the front end of the tractor. And if you look right behind the exhaust where the front axle pivots in this channel, there is some solid steel that you can get your jack plate on and jack up the front of the lawn tractor. Of course, whenever you use the floor jack, always use a jack stand for safety in case the floor jack fails. That way you don't get crushed. So with the tractor jacked up, we now have pretty easy access to the drag link. So this is the drag link, and the drag link makes a connection to the front left spindle as well as what I am going to call the steering plate. Now, I'm going to zoom in on this drag link. And a few days ago, I had my drag link quite literally pop out of this ball and socket joint. And to get me by for a few days, I put a little weld patch here, and that has kept things together. I'm going to turn the steering wheel back and forth just so you can see how much wear there is in this front joint. There's quite a bit of movement there. So if there's this much movement up front, there's definitely going to be a similar amount of movement on the rear ball and socket joint. So the first thing we need to do is to remove this nut and pop the front ball and socket joint out of the spindle. You may want to have a 1/2-inch box wrench, that way you could hold on to the edges. And then as for the nut itself, it's going to be a 9/16. All right, there's one joint. Now we need to access the second end of that drag link, that second ball and socket joint connected to the steering plate. You're going to be able to access it through this hole right here, and this is why I said, thank you engineers, you actually made our jobs a bit easier and simple for once in our lives. Incredible. So what you're going to have to do, you're just going to have to turn the steering wheel until that nut appears on what, again, I'm calling the steering plate. So again, that is a 9/16 nut. And you may have to hold your 1/2-inch wrench on the bottom side just like we did on the forward joint. That's not going to work. 1/2-inch drive, 1-foot extension. Let's try that. Yeah, that'll do it. Here's a close-up of the underside. You can see where you may have to stick your 1/2-inch box wrench onto, right there. All right, let's give her a go. There she is. So this is the rear ball and socket. I'd say she's a little worn. Take a look at the front. Definitely worn, but that weld actually tightened her up pretty good. So here's a life lesson for you if you haven't already figured this out yourself. Before you put a new part on, you always want to compare it directly to the old part, ensure that everything lines up, the bolt holes line up, it's the same bends and offsets. And this $22 part is a good match. Now, I do want to point out the orientation of the new part. So if you take a look at the new part, one leg is going to make a slight bend. This is going to go forward. As for the straight shaft, this is going to go towards the rear tires of the lawn tractor. All right, let's try installing our new drag link. You can see the hole right here. That's what I got to line her up into. Now, important tech tip. The new nut, as well as the old nut, has a flare, similar to a lug nut. The flare does not tighten up against the surface. You want to have the flat side tighten up against, in this case, the lock washer, which then engages with the steering plate. All right. I think that's the easiest way to get that first nut on, to kind of sneak your hand up and underneath while supporting that drag link with the other hand. So that's one side started. We'll start the other side and then we'll tighten them both up. All right, we'll drop our new drag link stem into the spindle, lock washer, followed by our nut. And again, flat side of the nut is going to go against the lock washer, which will engage with the spindle. And now we can tighten everything up. Torque spec, I'd say give her 1.5 ugga-duggas. Gonna have to step up my game here. Alright, it's getting tighter. Alright, that's firm, so 1.5 ugga-duggas. 1.5. And that is how you replace the drag link on a Craftsman lawn tractor. Again, that hole right there is going to be key. Time to engage dad mode. Come on, little one. Let's go for a walk. Or a stroll.